God. I'm Dan Lipinski.
I'm Bill Lipinski.
And I'm Ray Hanania, and we got a big topic today with two former congressmen here to really kind of give us some insight. And we're going to be talking about what happened to the big Republican red wave that was going to sweep America and almost get a veto-proof control of the US Congress, the House. And it doesn't even come close, did it?
I don't think anyone ever went that far, but go ahead.
But there was well, maybe not, but they sure were supposed to go further than they got. It looked like they're just like maybe 4 votes over the middle ground, just over the 50% mark, 4 extra seats. And I think when you really look at it, it looks like Trump had a double-edged sword. In some areas, he had some impact with some races, and in some areas, he actually generated, I think, the Democratic vote to hate him so much that they came out and voted. So I think that we saw a backlash, against the Republicans, I think because of Trump. And I think that we saw fewer Republicans winning. This Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania, I thought he was going to win. He had everything going until Trump really endorsed him, and then Obama came out and endorsed Fetterman, and Oprah Winfrey came out and endorsed Fetterman. I think it was a combination. The Democrats really stepped up to the plate, and I think that Trump isn't as influential in winning elections through his endorsement as people think.
Where do you think Trump did the Republicans some good?
Well, there were some smaller states, like not the rival states, but I was just looking at some of the data for the midterm elections, like in Ohio and North Carolina. They were talking about that there were 2 Republicans that Trump endorsed who just swept in. That J.D. Vance, they were saying, defeated his Democratic opponent, and Tim Ryan. His Democratic opponent, Tim Ryan, and Ted Budd.
Yeah, but in Ohio, if you look at every other statewide race, the Republican got about 60% of the vote, and J.D. Vance was under 54%. So he underperformed significantly other Republicans in the state of Ohio. I don't think he was, although Tim Ryan ran a very good campaign.
Yeah.
But still, I don't think Vance really did. I don't think he did that well. Ohio has just turned really Republican.
Yeah, and we saw in Florida the Republicans did great, but maybe that's because of DeSantis, right? Him stepping up to the plate.
Rubio did very well also. He got 58% of the vote.
Well, I heard him say last night, because of course TV decides everything. We don't even go by election returns. We go by what the CNN predicted Fetterman even before they, even got close to 50% of the vote. But it looked like they said that Florida was no longer a toss-up state anymore, that it was wholly Republican and would be a Republican state moving forward.
It certainly looks that way. In Ohio, the same thing. And Colorado, though a smaller state, has gone the opposite direction. I was just reading about someone saying, well, everyone's talking about DeSantis and in Florida, but Jared Polis, Democratic governor of Colorado, won pretty big, and Democrats did well in Colorado also. So, Polis is someone who there's been talk about him potentially running for president at some point. He was very much a out of step with a lot of Democrats on COVID policy in terms of opening up earlier than others did.
Well, let me pontificate for a few minutes and give you my reasons that the red wave did not materialize. Number one is the personality of Donald Trump and his influence on Republicans and his influence on independents. I think that his personality hurt hurt the Republicans very significantly in this election. Number two, for the most part, the candidates that he endorsed, the candidates he selected, did not win because they were not that good candidates at all. Mitch McConnell made reference to that several weeks ago, maybe it was several months ago. The situation with the Democrats pouring money into Republican states and districts to nominate the weakest possible Republican paid off for the Democrats. I thought it was a terrible thing that they did, but politically it definitely paid off for them. I think the abortion issue was very harmful to the Republicans for two reasons. One, it did affect a lot of suburban women. They were, concerned about the abortion issue. They came out and voted for the Democrats. Now, the Republicans did nothing as far as abortion or right to life. They simply ignored the issue entirely. And I feel that if they had come out and articulated a reasonable position on abortion, they could have negated a lot of that influence that the Democrats had on the women in the suburban community for voting Democratic and not voting Republican. Those are some of the issues that I think were very instrumental in not having a red wave. Now, I think that we have built up, because of this election, DeSantis very, very much. And I believe that if he has the guts, the courage to challenge Trump, he can defeat Trump in the primaries, perhaps get Trump not even to run, and he can become the next presidential candidate of the Republican Party. And I think that we can turn, the Republicans that is, can turn disaster into something positive if we get rid of Trump and if DeSantis becomes the presidential candidate. On top of that, because the Democrats did so well, I don't see how they possibly get rid of good old Joe if he wants to run for president once again. So we can really turn this disaster into something plus. If Biden is the Democratic candidate, DeSantis is the Republican candidate, I'd put my money definitely on DeSantis. That's my 2 cents worth.
It is a little more than 2 cents.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I mean, I generally agree with everything that you said there. Let me throw in a few more things. What the expectation was that President Biden's not, his popularity is not good. His approval is not far from where Trump was in 2018 when Democrats picked up 40 seats in the House. On top of that, Americans are upset about inflation, other issues, crime. Although crime, I'm hearing talk that wasn't that big of an issue. Although Republicans picked up 2 seats in the New York City, on Long Island. There are 2 seats that Republicans did flip there. So maybe there was some impact there on the crime issue. But apparently what the exit polls were showing is that people who thought that the economy is not doing well, not terrible, but basically said the economy is not so good. Usually those people go against the president's party by about 20 points, and they actually voted for Democrats this time. They for whatever reason, they were not either convinced that the Biden was to blame or that the Republican parties did not have a real answer to the problem of inflation and other problems in the economy. The other thing that happened is independents. Independents usually go against an unpopular president. significantly, and they didn't this time. So I think the big problem is something I've been talking about for a while, and when I talked about when I was talking about running as an independent for Congress this year, was that people don't like either party. They're not happy with the Democrats right now, but who are the Republicans? What are they offering? The only thing that they seem to be is a cult of personality for Donald Trump, and a lot of people can't stand Donald Trump. And as much as I hate to say it, all this going after Trump by President Biden and Democrats, just reminding people about who Trump is. That's what people think about when they think about Republicans now is Donald Trump. I agree. This could be a blessing in disguise for Republicans if they can dump Trump. It'd help them, and the Democrats are saddled with President Biden unless he somehow decides that he's not capable of running in 2024. I think they're going to be stuck with him. DeSantis certainly is looking good, although we had this debate before we were on this show. Everyone's given DeSantis so much credit. He won 60% of the vote in Florida. I said Marco Rubio won 58%, and he was running against a much better opponent than DeSantis was. So was it DeSantis? Is it just Republicans? Florida's turning that Republican. But DeSantis certainly is a front runner. You see people coming out now saying, very forcefully, some are saying the Republicans need to get rid of Trump. And as actually a state legislator in Virginia who's been a very big Trump supporter, very, very big Trump supporter, someone very much like Donald Trump, who said, look, Donald Trump has hurt the Republican Party significantly. He needs to go. It'll be interesting to see if this builds up.
Yeah,
I think I just want to add one point here, or emphasize a point that Dan made. What did the Republicans stand for? What was the Republicans' platform in this particular election? Nothing other than they were against the Democrats. They were the alternative to the Democrats. They did not present any positive image for themselves with various programs to combat crime, to combat inflation. So, they were a nondescript entity and burdened with Trump, image out there.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ray.
I was going to say that I don't think the Republicans really had a strong national message, but being in Illinois, I thought they had a good message with fighting crime, because crime is so prominent in our daily lives. We read it in the paper, we see it on TV, mostly from Chicago and Cook County. It's a frightening thing. And I thought maybe women, for most women, abortion is a principle, not a reality, not something that they have to make a decision on. But although they may think that, their daughters have the right to do that, I thought that the fear of crime and this increase of crime from Chicago and Cook County would spark some people to turn to the Republican vote. But as we see in Illinois, I don't think it worked very well. When we look at Foster and Lauren Underwood and Sean Casten, all three of them were identified as being potential, losses to a Republican wave. We didn't see that wave in Illinois either. Although in the case of Sean Casten and Pekow, I think Sean Casten won mainly because the DuPage Republican Party looked like it collapsed. It looked like they were in total disarray. I think DuPage County is a Democratic county now. And, going back in history, it always used to be in my mind that Cook County was the Democratic voice of Illinois and DuPage County was the Republican voice of Illinois. And now when you look at DuPage County, I don't think they put up much of an effort. And I think Pekow lost that election mainly because of what happened in DuPage County. Sean Casten came through with 20,000 more votes, than Pekow. And that to me was a race that maybe the Republicans thought that they would get, to help turn the House, but they didn't. They lost that. And then, of course, we have a governor who has so much money, $3.6 billion, that he can afford to spend 24 million of it to help a Republican running for governor in the Republican primary, in the hopes that that Republican will be the guy he runs against. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. He spent $24 million and helped Darren Bailey become the candidate for governor. So for me, it's like the Republican Party locally is a mess. And I'm shocked by that because
That's putting it nicely.
yeah, it's true. You're right.
I don't think there is a Republican Party left in Illinois.
I
honestly.
think after yesterday, it really raises a question, although out south, and I help Senator Mike Hastings. Mike has had a divorce, and the Republicans weaponized that divorce against him. They ran a candidate with a strong Irish name, Patrick Sheehan, who has no real background. He comes out of the Payless Township, organization, which isn't very influential, the Republican Party there. And yet that race is a dead heat. I think only 38 votes, divide Hastings from Sheehan. And although there's still votes that are coming in from Hastings area, I think Hastings will pull it off. But it tells me that the Republicans are organized in a targeted fashion, but not in a broad fashion. And I think maybe that is that possibly the problem that we see in other states around the country?
Well, I guess I didn't really get to why all this happened. I think a big reason is, look, in midterms, usually if there's a party, the party in power, president's party, especially when he has both houses of Congress, especially if he's unpopular, that members of the president's party, voters in the president's party, get discouraged. They don't come out and vote in midterms. The opposition comes out and votes in bigger numbers. I think one of the issues that happened yesterday, probably if you look at a lot of the races across the country, they turned out the way that you would expect if both sides turned out. And sort of it had an even enthusiasm, and they turned out in about the same percent of Democrats and same percent of Republicans voters turned out. That's what happened. People weren't staying, Democrats weren't discouraged, weren't staying home. And Democrats, I looked at the races locally, and that seemed the Democrats were just running to, we just need to get our voters out. We need to scare our voters about the Republicans and get them out to vote. We don't care about anyone in the middle or persuading anybody. I mean, that Pekow-Kasten race, I don't think either of them cared about persuading anybody who was in the middle. Pekow had to in a 55% Democratic district bring some Democrats over. I didn't see anything from Pekow whatsoever. I saw all those anti-Kasten ads that $1.8 million bought in 1 week. I couldn't turn my TV or my computer on without seeing an anti-Kasten ad. If I wasn't who I am, I wouldn't know who he was running against. I'd have no idea. I would have no idea who Keith Pekow was, except for the attack ads that Sean Kasten ran against him.
Yeah, Pekow didn't do a very good job of presenting himself, I thought. I thought that, of course, I know him. He's from Orland Park, where I live. He's a very contentious person, and he's been mayor, I think, 6 years. And the one thing I've noticed about Pekow, and I think, veteran politicians like yourself know this, it's easy to make enemies in politics. It's harder to make friends, but making friends and allies is what keeps you in office. Pekow's big talent, I think, has been to just attack and make enemies. And he has isolated not only the Democrats and the conservative Democrats like myself, who supported him when he first started. He's basically isolated us. And I think he's divided his own party. There are a lot of Republicans, moderate Republicans, that he's fighting with. And he's really kind of sliced and diced that party to pieces. He's going to be a powerhouse in Orland Park. He's going to be like a big bullfrog in a little pond, now in Illinois, but he lost the opportunity to have this big voice nationally because I don't think he understands, how to work with other people and how to build consensus.
You're talking about Bailey, Ray?
Peek out.
Oh,
Peek out, the Kasten's Republican opponent who lost, and by a pretty big toward the end. I don't know if you saw the election, it was close all the way through, like a few hundred or 1,000 votes. And then at the very end of the evening, Kasten had a surge of 20,000 votes that came in from Cook County. And that killed Peekow's candidacy dead.
Well, they were basically even, I think, in suburban Cook in the district, a little bit of the city in the district, they were even. And so the difference was DuPage, where, as you said, Ray, Kasten won by 20,000. DuPage just elected their, DuPage County chair, a Democrat.
Right.
I mean, that's incredible. Cronin didn't run again to be chairman of the DuPage County Board, and a Democrat won. Republicans were saying, those who left because of Trump, especially suburban women, they're going to be back. As you said, Ray, because of crime, because of inflation, they're hurt by that. We don't know, but for sure, but it certainly doesn't look like those who fled the Republican Party because of Trump came back. So, hey, Republicans need to dump Trump, and they need to come up with what are they going to do for people. They need to answer that, and we'll see. We'll see what happens going forward. And presumably they have the majority in the House. I think Kevin McCarthy, I don't know if he can get elected speaker with the small majority. Last time he had a chance to be speaker in 2015 when Boehner resigned, he couldn't get the votes. He was in line to be speaker. He couldn't get the votes. The Republicans turned to Paul Ryan, begged him to be speaker. Paul Ryan served as speaker until Republicans lost the majority. McCarthy's up again. Is he going to be able to get the votes? I mean, that could be a complete bloodbath amongst the Republicans in the House. And then the Senate. If Laxalt can hang on in Nevada, presumably Kelly hangs on, the Democrat hangs on in Arizona for the Senate, and then we come down to a runoff in Georgia again. And Donald Trump has suggested he's going to announce that he's running on November 15th, which will probably absolutely kill any chance for Herschel Walker. Who knows what Trump will say or do? But that won't be helpful.
It'll backfire in Georgia, is what you're saying, right? Yeah. He has, because they're in a runoff now.
So,
well, the Republican Party nationally and locally, to a great degree, have to be completely revamped, come up with new ideas, fresh leadership, and hope and pray that they can communicate better with the population. But the main thing they have to do is get rid of Trump. If they get rid of Trump, anything in 2 years, but they have to get rid of him. He is destroying that party. Now, what's the story on the House at the present time? Do either one of you know exactly where we're at with the House?
Well, I was just looking at the numbers. The New York Times says that there are 206 Republicans and 176 Democrats for certain. But everybody believes that the Republicans might get up to about 221, over that 218 that they need to control the House. So they might have 2 or 3, more seats, but I'm not even, and the fact that it's still uncertain should be a concern. If I were a Republican, and as Dan pointed out, if I were McCarthy, I'd be worried right now how weak, the Republicans are. I wanted to go back to what you and both you and Dan said about, I think you're right. The Republicans, if they want to save themselves, they really got to dump Trump. And they also have to dump this angry personality strategy that they have, which was characterized by Trump, that as Bill many times pointed out, goes back many presidencies to when who was the Republican Speaker of the House that used personality politics to attack Clinton? What was that speaker's name? I can't.
Talking about Newt Gingrich?
Yeah, Newt Gingrich. They have to finally end that, and they have to return to thinking strategically and get rid of this angry politics. I think Keith Peacock was a good example of a Republican who embraced the Trump strategy of anger and name calling. As you said, Dan, he spent most of his time attacking Sean Casten. I very little heard him talking about why he was a good candidate for Congress. It was mostly about why Casten was a bad person, why crime was spreading because of Lori Lightfoot and Kim Foxx. But they got to get rid of that Donald Trump pettiness and anger and find somebody who's going to be a smart politician, the way, Republican politicians had been in the past, and develop a strategy, because they are losing out. And I think,
that name right over your left shoulder for both of you, Ronald Reagan. That's now Henry Olsen has wrote a piece today. Henry Olsen, who writes in the columnist in the Washington Post, was talking about how Republicans are going to have this huge wave on election day, and how this was the start of a long-term Republican majority. And he wrote a piece today where he admitted he was wrong, which is, I give him a lot of credit, because how often do we see political pundits, much less politicians, ever admit that they were wrong about something?
Almost never.
And analyze it. But he ends his, he goes through everything and he ends it and says, well, Ron DeSantis, it could be just like after 1978, Republicans thought they're going to do well in the midterm, and with Jimmy Carter and malaise and stagflation, and it didn't do too well in 78, but in 1980, they had the governor from a Sunbelt state come in, and he's trying to bring in DeSantis as a second coming of Ronald Reagan. But I tell you, Republicans have to stop just talking about Ronald Reagan and cutting taxes. And that's, Ronald Reagan was a very, very different politician than Donald Trump in many ways, including he had his principles, but he was always willing to compromise. He's always willing to, he believed in incrementalism. Our politics doesn't believe that anymore. Our politics doesn't believe in let's come together and get things done. And our country just desperately needs that. I don't know, what do Democrats do for the next 2 years? It's hard to know. If they have the Senate, they will, nominate and put into federal judgeships a lot of judges. If a Supreme Court justice passes away, they'll get to put another justice on the Supreme Court if they have the majority in the Senate. Otherwise, not much is going to happen. How the debt ceiling is going to have to be raised next year, unless the Democrats do it in the lame duck. I don't see them doing it. How are they going to come together? Republicans are in the majority in the House. How are they going to come together on a budget, appropriations bills? And so this all leads, unfortunately, I hate talking about 2024 already, but what's going to happen besides maybe anti-China legislation that the two parties can come together on in the next few years? And will Republicans even try to come together on anything with with Biden.
Well, if the Republicans only have a 3 or 4 seat majority in the House, I don't really understand how Kevin McCarthy can organize the Republican conference. It would seem to me that he has still a number of very radical Trump cultists in his constituency there in the Republican conference. I don't know how those guys ever go along with anything he wants to do. And as far as raising the debt limit, he's going to have to get Democrats to go along with him. And he's going to have to make some compromises with Democrats if that's the case. But there's no way that slim Republican majority is ever going to raise the debt limit. No way, shape, or form.
You know, it'd be great if some Republicans stood up and started talking about their ideas to address, you know, inflation, their ideas to address crime, you know, in some positive, productive way, rather than, you know, the way everything is being done now, where everybody from both sides are just name calling. I think the Democrats, ironically, are very weak with Biden, but they've become stronger by default, simply because the Republicans, when you really look at them after this election, you have to wonder how they're going to keep it together. It's just that anger, name calling politics, that pettiness, it just doesn't work. It's not enough to scream now and you know, fear monger anymore. I think a good Republican it would be great to see somebody stand up and say, I have this great idea on how to address inflation. I'd like to present it. I'd like to work with both parties. And it could be a great opportunity for somebody. I'm just not sure that they can get to that point as long as Donald Trump is there beating up on them if they don't support him, you know, for president or go along with his agenda.
Well, I think Biden was, I mean, Joe Biden is not, another problem for Republicans. He's not threatening. He's not a threatening person. And no one has noticed my homage to John Fetterman here with my black hoodie. Fetterman, look, you look at the guy, I mean, even, you know, set aside the stroke in you know, what that did, but you look at the guy and you think, oh, you know, he's nothing, he must be an average guy. I actually, early on, I thought, you know, I really love the fact that Fetterman runs around in a black hoodie and his shorts, although I'm not going to wear the shorts, would never wear shorts campaign in, but I thought, hey, I don't like dressing up. I love to see a candidate who's like, hey, I don't have to dress up to go out and campaign. I'm just, and I think people saw that, hey, he's just he's a no regular guy. And that's not threatening. Tim Ryan did a great job of, you know, I know Tim Ryan from the House, and Tim Ryan he's out there on the left, but in many ways he is, I mean, he's a guy from the Mahoning Valley in Ohio, and people, you know, are more comfortable with that. Joe Biden's not threatening. And so it's hard to make them into these really scary characters, and I think that also is something that hurt Republicans, especially when you're just attacking, and when you're just using fear mongering. You need the person that you're fear mongering against to be really scary, and that's not those people I was talking about.
Well, see, as far as Fetterman, I could not, you know, I thought it was criminal that his family and the Democrats allowed him to run in the general election. The right-wing Republicans are already spinning it. As soon as he gets sworn in, he's going to step down, and then the Democrats are going to put his wife in his place, because he really won't know that he's even in the US Senate because of his mental condition. That kind of stuff, you know, does not help the overall cause of the Republican Party or of this country, quite frankly. You know, we have to try to we have to get people to emerge that are really interested in the direction of this republic, not just winning elections or not just following someone like Trump who says things that you yourself won't say, but you like the fact that he says them. Ron DeSantis gave a great speech last night. I listened to the entire speech. It was Reagan-esque, that speech. Now, I have no idea if he has the personality of Ronald Reagan. Personality in government, in politics, can still overcome a multiple of disagreements. I tell the story often that when Ronald Reagan was president of the United States, I would step out of my office on Archer Avenue in Chicago. I'd stop and talk to the first 10 people that came down the street about Ronald Reagan, and I would bring up 10 issues. Most people would disagree with Reagan, 7, 8 of the issues. They were totally opposed to what his position was. I would ask them, who are you going to vote for president? There was no question in their mind. Ronald Reagan. Why? I like him. He's a nice guy. The Republicans have to develop some people with nice personality. Dan mentioned that Joe Biden, is not feared, is not threatening. That's very, very true. Unfortunately, there are few Republican candidates nowadays who don't seem to be threatening in one way or another to the general populace.
But Pennsylvania was a big Democratic state. And what I noticed about that election between Fetterman and Mehmet Oz was that the whole almost 90% of the discussion, the political discussion in that race was talking about Fetterman. Everything was about Fetterman. And I was thinking, because I happen to be Arab American, I knew that you could tell from his first name, Mehmet Oz was Muslim and he's Turkish. And I wondered how much that his being Muslim might undermine his candidacy, even in Pennsylvania, where Muslims still have issues. He would have been the first Muslim US senator had he, won that election. But he never got to the point where he talked about issues in a way that it became the focus of the election. He was like an afterthought, like, oh, he's the guy we're running against. Everything was about Fetterman. I never knew anything about Fetterman before the election. I knew everything about Dr. Oz, and yet it was Fetterman every day that they talked about, and I think that ended up helping him.
Well, I knew nothing about Oz being a Muslim at all up until maybe 2 days ago, okay? Secondly, I had no idea what his real name was, nor was I really interested.
I still don't know what it is.
I still don't know what it is either.
No, his last name. No, his last name. What is his last name, Ray?
Oz, Mehmet Oz.
No, it's longer. It's Oz is shortened, right?
Yeah, he shortened it from a Turkish, or originally he's
Yeah,
Turkish.
well, that's the name. I don't, do you know that name?
No, I don't. All I know is he was introduced to us by Oprah Winfrey, back in, I think, 2005. And then as a result of that, Mehmet Oz became a famous TV celebrity talk show host because of Oprah. And then she turned on him in this election. And I thought the only time I would hear about him was when Oprah said, I'm not going to support him. I'm the guy I helped. I'm going to support Fetterman. And he just ran a bad campaign. And I think
a terrible campaign to lose to Fetterman. And I don't really think Pennsylvania is that heavily Democratic. Once you get beyond Philadelphia, and until you get to Pittsburgh, it seems to me it's pretty Republican.
Yeah.
Dan, you know a lot more about Pennsylvania than I.
Philadelphia is really big, though.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Philadelphia is huge. I mean, that's. Well, Republicans also had a even worse gubernatorial candidate in Pennsylvania, though. I mean, that guy was. It's funny. I say this, but I can't honestly tell you anything about the guy except I kept hearing that he's a crazy Trump guy, and no one ever gave him a chance. because of that, and obviously he wasn't. He did very, very poorly. But hey, something else. We were talking about a lot about the Republicans. I think a big story that's going to come out now is I expect the entire House Democratic leadership to be gone. I expect Nancy Pelosi to step aside, and I think that's going to force out Steny Hoyer and Jim Clyburn. I think they're finally. I mean, Nancy was there for how long? She was a party leader for the entire 16 years I was there. She had been already when I got there. She went through some terrible elections where Democrats got crushed and she got put back in, no matter how much I tried to get rid of her. But she was highly successful. Look, she was great at what she did. No question about it. I have to give her credit for that she was very effective as speaker. But I think she's out now. I think she's gonna step down. I don't know when that's going to exactly they'll take place. Hoyer would love to stick around and move up, but that's not happening. And Jim Clyburn, I think, will just sort of step aside and go back. And I remember he was asked a couple of years ago about it, if he had an interest in being speaker, and I think he kind of laughed it off. I think Jim Clyburn would be happy to go back to South Carolina and play some golf after he made Joe Biden president.
Well, we probably should come to some last final thoughts from everybody right now, because I think we've had a pretty lively, interesting discussion for we're right at past our time limit that we always shoot for. But I don't know if you want to do that. Any final thoughts or any?
Oh, my final thought is, I think Nancy's going to finally leave the House because she has to go back to San Francisco to take care of Paul. And I think that's exactly what you're going to hear from her very shortly. She has to go home to San Francisco and take care of her husband, Paul. She hates to leave the Democratic Party in the House or leave the Democratic Party, in Washington, but she's got to go home and take care of Paul. It's the perfect way for her to end an extremely successful career. I don't agree with her. I never did, but I give her credit. She's been good for her purposes. That's my final word on this subject.
Yeah, mine is basically that we're still going to be looking at some of these elections. It's probably going to take a few days maybe before we actually see how weak or how strong or how weak the Republican control of the House is going to be, and whether the Democrats or whether the Republicans can take over the Senate or not. But I would like to see, just somebody with good ideas just step up to the plate. Somebody that could talk to real issues rather than hitting these hot buttons that, push the emotions of voters, thinking that that's the only way to drive them to the polls.
Well, first of all, I won't say anything more about Nancy. At some point in the future, I have a few stories that I'll be telling, but the Republicans need to become, we were talking about, they got to dump Trump, but Trump did bring in, working class voters. Now Republicans need real policies, not just rhetoric, to help working people, to help families, to help pregnant women with, families with little children. And there are Republicans out there who have these ideas and have these plans. And I really think that there's an opportunity that Republicans have if they can get rid of Trump. There's still a fight going on in the party. They can become a real working class party. It gives them great opportunity going forward. I don't know if they'll be able to pull that together. And Democrats, I'm not sure where they're going to go in the next 2 years. We're just going to see lots of fights going on. American people who really aren't very happy with either party, aren't happy with the direction of the country. And look, a large a significant majority of people in exit polls said they don't want Joe Biden to run for president. He's going to run. 2024, I'm still pushing it. Joe Manchin, Mitt Romney, ticket, independence. That's what I want to see. Some people already complained to me, these guys are too old. Hey, I said, okay, you find me 2 other sort of problem-solving American politicians these days. We don't have them. So it's going to be another. This doesn't solve anything for the country. We got a lot of problems, a lot of issues. Might be heading to recession. We'll see what happens.
All right, well, this has been Two Guys on Politics. I'm Ray Hanania,
I'm Bill Lipinski.
I'm Dan Lipinski.
and we'll see you all
Everyone
next,
vote if you can.
then we'll see everybody next week again. Thank you, everybody. All right, bye-bye. Yeah. All right, stop recording.